Art Deco followed Art Nouveau. The geometric shapes in this mold remind me of that period, and you can see how nicely that translates. This design also incorporates a fine silver finding, which is then fired in place and then used to suspend the Swarovski crystals from, and it makes use of a tube bale. The tube bale is created using the stainless steel extruder. The stainless steel extruder is made specifically for use with metal clay, as the metal clay can dry in here and not have an adverse reaction like it would with aluminum. The disc we're using is actually from the aluminum extruder, and then we've also incorporated a core adapter. The disc gets added to the core adapter. That all gets placed inside the end of the extruder, and that gets put onto the end. And then as the clay comes out, the core adapter forces that opening, so then you get a tube bale. We're going to go back to the beginning, create the mold, and get back to this so you can see how it really works. I've pre-treated the mold with a clay conditioner just to help the silicone release exactly how I want it to. I'm going to fill the mold that I've chosen to work with some clay, and you want to guesstimate how much clay you need as well as make sure you have enough, and that could take 1 or 2 times to get it right. And you can see some of that excess kind of squishes out, but then you at least know you're getting the piece in there nice and neat, so you can kind of bend it and have it help you work that piece out. So I will use just the point of an awl, any sharp object that you might have, and trim out that circle. For me, removing this circle was just something that it seemed like it wanted to be a window. You could leave it and then add texture to that center part, or leave it nice and smooth. Really, the one mold in itself gives you some flexibility in design. And just pull that away. There we go. And I'll get this side. And then I will insert the fine silver finding. And the lip of the design allows me to fit in this up eye. You want to offer a little resistance so you're sure to not stretch out the design, but you also want to get out of the way of the finding so that it can come through the clay and be anchored in place. And really, if you only just get a little bit of the mold and the finding together, you can always add more clay later, and we will certainly address that as this project progresses. So just go around with some water and get everything nice and neat. The more you clean up here, the less cleanup you have later. All right, so we'll just keep working that, and then once it's to the point where you like it and feel comfortable, you can just set it aside to dry, and while it's drying, we'll get working on that tube bale. So now we're going to make the tube bale. I'm going to place some clay into the extruder, and the condition of the clay should be as close to fresh out of the package as possible so that you get a nice smooth skin on the tube. Just means less work later, and because it's hollow and it's a tube, it's just nice to start out as cleanly as you can. So I'm going to put the disc over the core adapter, and then I'm going to place the whole assembly upside down into the end of the extruder. I will get the end onto the extruder and then check the position of the core adapter so it's as centered as possible. There we go. It likes to shift off center, so try to keep an eye on it as you tighten it down. Okay, and then I like to extrude holding it up high so the tube has some room to grow, and it also gives me the ability to just keep this going in a smooth motion. if you start and stop, or if you have anything impeding your progress, you get lines in the clay. And the core adapter is sticking out, so I need to cut around it to cut the tube free. Now, it's larger than I need, so I'm going to trim the ends. And you want to work with a sharp blade and obviously work carefully. Check this end. And I'm going to make sure I'm going through the layers, but not pushing down too hard. And you may find that a sawing motion helps, just so you're not smushing it. From here, you can open up that end, because it did get smushed a little, and clean that up. So by inserting the tip of the end of an awl, it gives me a little bit of resistance. So I have something to work against, so I'm not collapsing the end. So I'll just get in here and smooth the ends. Let's see, we don't need that in our way. And just make things nice and neat. And if you have any grooves or any lines in the tube, you can use water here also, just to kind of make things nice and clean before you let this dry. Once you're happy with it, and you're sure it's going to be the shape you want, set it aside to dry. From here, we'll refine this and the pendant and bring them together. So our pieces are dry and ready to be taken to the next level. So I like to work with the polishing papers. I think they get into all of the crevices we need them to. And this is the lowest grit. So I always start with green, 400, and just go across everywhere, take down any imperfections. And if you find the end needs to be squared off a little, you can use a sanding board, and that'll really just true up the end. And then if you find that you need to go into the opening for any reason, if you need to refine in there, you might actually find this end will work. Get into the openings. You can also use jeweler's files, but I really like these. I think they're a little less abrasive than the jeweler's files. The grit, it starts out a little bit more fine than what the jeweler's files. If you have to remove a lot of material, definitely start with the jeweler's files. And then in here, the tip will get into any extra clay that you want to remove to help heighten up any of the details. And all of the polishing papers can be brought along the surface to actually start polishing the clay or the metal in the clay, so that when you get to the end and you've fired your pieces, the finishing work is already started and just that much easier. So we're just going to go across everything. You don't want to remove too much detail, but you can see how even just going across the surface just brings up some of the extra little touches that this mold and the texture in the mold has to it. And you'll just keep going through all the progression. This piece has already gone through its courses, so it's time to join them together. Depending on how far the pin went into your piece, you're going to possibly need to trim it. We're going to use cutters. You don't want to trim the whole thing off, but you also, the longer it is, the further the distance the tube bail will have to start, and then the greater the gap between the two. And design-wise, you may not mind that at all, but I want to show you how I made this piece so you can at least get an idea of the different options available to you. So I will trim to about there, cover that so it doesn't fly across the room. And it's fine silver, so it can be refined and reused in something else. And I'm going to trim just a little bit more. Okay, so The two are ready. I'm going to add a little bit of water just to get the clay a little bit awake. And I will add a little bit of paste. This is a fairly significant connection, so I want to really give it the greatest chance possible. So I'm going to add a little bit of paste here. There we go. And some paste where the clay is going to go. There. And then I'm going to break off a piece of clay and place it between the two. So I'm kind of making a sandwich. Now you don't want it to be too significant, but you also want enough that you can overlap the two layers. That'll probably be a little bit more than we need, but you can get a really good idea of what I'm going to do. I'm going to press those two together. And now, actually, because I've used so much, I have no doubt that my connection will be what I want it to be, and it'll be nice and secure. I'm going to hold this together and remove a lot of that excess without removing what I want to leave behind. There we go. You can see you just gotta have to play with your tools to join them together. And then as you're working the clay and you're keeping it moist, you'll be able to actually get it so that it looks pretty. But meanwhile, you've completed that join really well. And like I mentioned, you want to keep it moist, so I'm going to add a little bit of water. And things get a little muddy once you add water, and that's not a bad thing. It really helps you smooth things out. It just, your hands definitely start to show the clay. Once you're done working, it's just great to clean off your hands and save all the little pieces that come off. Okay, so just continue to work that. Obviously this needs more work, but continue to do that, and then I'll show you what it looks like once you've gotten it to the next step. Put that aside. And here we go. Okay, so we've gotten this joint nice and neat and cleaned up, so this is what you're striving for. And because we've taken the time to refine this ahead of joining the two pieces together, we really just need to focus on this area and get that cleaned up. So we're going to go back to using the same polishing materials. So, and then these sanding sticks will allow me to get into some of the tighter corners and really clean that up. And for each of them, the polishing papers, the sanding sticks, any of the polishing tools you're using, just make sure you go through all the grits. And you may not see a big difference between the 4 and the 600 or the green and the gray, but as you progress all the way through, you will definitely notice the difference. In fact, I can show you on this piece. See how shiny the metal already is? And really, it's still clay. It's not fired. This is how shiny I can get it going through all the progression of the polishing papers. So you want to reach this before you fire. And once you get to that point, we'll fire the pendant. And this tube is not too large. You could always put a piece of fiber blanket through here, but it won't collapse. It really is not that significant. You can fire it flat because the back does not have any texture. You can just put it right on the kiln shelf, pop it into the kiln, and then once it's cooled room temperature, we'll finish it. And that's what we're going to take care of next. Piece is fired and cooled to room temperature. We can finish it, and we can finish it using the stainless steel brush or any of the other finishing techniques that are in the fundamental section. To show you with the stainless steel brush, which really works well to get into all of the texture that is now in the clay, well, in the metal, because this is fired. It really brings up the shine in between all of the little details. And the satin finish is actually a beautiful finish and works very well, especially given the industrial feel of the Art Deco period. Just want to make sure you go all over. Now, if you decide you want to move this into the tumbler, like the finished necklace was done, you'll want to make sure you fill the tube bail with either a paper clip or a pipe cleaner. And believe me when I tell you, I usually forget. And then you're dealing with trying to remove the stainless steel shot from this. It's not easy. Pipe cleaner, obviously, as you can see, curves really well and just goes in very easily, and a paper clip works just as well. The finished design incorporates a lot of different crystal, chain, jump rings, and the chain that was able to be fed through the tube bail really complements that industrial feel using that gunmetal color. And as you can see, just from that one mold, there's lots of different designs that you can choose that also complement the Art Deco period, and there's a lot of other molds that you can choose that can take you into completely different directions. So I just wish you well in figuring out which design you want to work on, and just have a great time.